Growing up, I was never really one to believe in the concept of evil spirits, witches, demons, monsters, or ghosts. Maybe it stemmed from both my parents being professors, therefore people of science who paid no relevance to religion, the supernatural, paranormal, and of the sorts. So their DNA was probably rubbing off on me. Or maybe it had something to do with the fact that I was a strange child growing up. The odd duck, as some people would say. I couldn't really tell. My grandmother, however, referred to me as the special one. She was the typical Nigerian grandmother, always quick to link everything in life to mysterious unknown powers or some unseen force, which quite frankly surprised me, as I sometimes wondered how my mother could possibly be her offspring. When I would go visiting during the holidays, she would whisper stories from her youth, strange, eerie tales that always felt a little too vivid to be fiction. These images were painted so well in my head as she spoke of the supernatural like they were her real life experiences, describing things in such detail that it sent chills down my spine. I was always so intrigued, fascinated, and oftentimes terrified. But there was one story she told more often than the others, one that always left her voice a little shakier, her eyes a little distant. She spoke of an old woman dressed in rags, with a pale-looking face lost to time. This figure would appear everywhere my grandmother went, standing in crowds, watching from across the street, lurking, silent, still. The corners of her mouth would twitch slowly, stretching into a crooked, sinister grin. And just like that, the woman would vanish without a trace. As a child, I took comfort in telling myself that these were just make-believe stories, harmless tales to stir up my imagination. I believed that, or so I thought. Time slipped by, and as I grew older, the visits became fewer and farther between. By the time I turned 18, I had moved abroad to pursue my studies, eventually making a new life for myself in Poland. Then, just a month before my 25th birthday, I received a call, completely out of the blue. It was my grandmother. I was quite happy, but completely shocked as well. I hadn't heard from her in years. She told me how much she missed me and how my parents hardly checked in on her. Not that she blamed them, knowing how demanding their jobs were. We talked for a while, and in her voice, I could tell she was very lonely. Then, eventually, she broke the news to me. She was terminally ill and didn't know how long she had left. Her only wish was to see her one and only grandchild before she passed. Guilt gripped me. It gripped me hard. I blamed my mother and father. I blamed myself. I couldn't believe how selfish and neglectful we all were. Her kin, her only family, and we failed her. My heart ached. With teary eyes and a shaky voice, I said, "I'm so sorry, Grandma, for everything. What do you need me to do? And I promise you, I will do it. She gently pleaded for me to come back home, and I agreed. By weekend, I had booked a 10-hour flight from Warsaw to Lagos. I didn't bother stopping by my parents' house or even calling them when I landed. I boarded another flight from Lagos to Asaba, and by the following morning, I was on a bus to Agbo, where my grandmother lived. The moment she saw me, I couldn't help but notice a little grin by the corners of her mouth before she came up to hug me. I didn't think much of it, and we basked each other in warm embrace. The first 3 days were so blissful. We laughed and talked for hours, practically enjoying each other's company. By the 4th day, I began to notice something was off. I didn't see her eat or drink anything. I would oftentimes catch my grandmother glaring at me, or sometimes come into my room at night and just stand by my bed, watching me. I was watering her mini garden one of those days when I heard a knock at the gate. I went ahead to open it. I didn't see anyone. I was about to close the gate when I had this urge to look back. There she was. She stood there, still as death. Her figure draped in layers of rags that clung to her body like second skin. Her hair was a wild, tangled mess of dreadlocks, matted and crusted, like they hadn't been washed in decades. Her skin was covered in sores, large, ugly wounds scattered across her arms, neck, and legs. And yet, her eyes were the worst, hollowed like two bottomless pits that watched, not with curiosity, but with hunger. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She simply stood there and vanished into thin air. It was the old woman from my grandmother's tales. I was so sure of it. I had never been so afraid in my life. I stood there, frozen for half a minute before I regained my senses. This wasn't some silly make-believe tale. I saw it with my own eyes. I know I saw it. Quickly, I rushed into the house to gather my things. I had had enough of all the spookiness going around me. I didn't bother looking for my grandmother. I didn't care for any explanations. I just wanted out of there. I was about zipping my bags when all of a sudden, I felt a heavy blow on my head. The next thing was silence. I don't know how long I was out, but when I slowly opened my eyes, I found myself on top of what looked like an altar. My hands and feet tied. I heard humming and diabolical laughter all around me, but I saw no one there. It almost seemed like it was coming from the atmosphere. In a flash, figures appeared around me, surrounding me. One of them was my very own grandmother. They began to speak in incantations I couldn't understand as my grandmother came forward, holding what looked like a dagger. Standing beside me was a scary old woman, grinning mischievously. I let out a loud scream, pleading and begging for my life. She raised the dagger up high, and I shut my eyes, preparing for the worst, when I heard a bang. I opened my eyes again and found myself in a white room. Empty, quiet, still. Then the door opened. It was my grandmother. I froze. No, this couldn't still be happening. Wasn't it all to be over? I thought to myself. Then she said in a soft, gentle voice, "Kelly, are you all right? You were screaming again." "Another bad dream?" she asked. So much peace and quiet in her voice. How could it possibly be that the loving grandmother who smiled at me with concern was the same person whose hands raised a dagger in something that seemed so unreal? I blinked. My heart was racing. The room around me slowly came into focus. My room. Back in my parents' house. A dream? Just a dream? Then why did it feel so real? A moment later, my mom stepped into the room, her voice warm but casual. She came in to tell me dinner was ready and I should come help set the table, but my grandmother offered to do it instead. As they both made their way out, my gaze locked on her. Was I really dreaming? Could she be in the struggle to make sense of it all? My grandmother turned with a grin on her face. Then she shut the door after her. In that brief moment, I saw a grandmother who would happily tell stories to her grandchild. I stood up from my bed, trying to shrug everything off, until something by the side of my pillow caught my eye. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine and froze my feet. It was a silver dagger.